And welcome back to another video. Glad to have you here. On this one, I'm talking to you about how to restore your headlights via sanding and polishing. So this isn't going to be like a 10-minute fix. This is more of a professional level. It's more of an extensive process. If you're looking for like a 10-minute fix, not the video for you, not the process for you, go ahead and dislike this video and then I'll see you on the next one hopefully. But if you want more of an extensive process, if you want to go the full 9 yards, this video is for you. I'll try to link all the products and tools down below because they can get quite expensive with the sandpaper. So I have a bunch of links down below if you're interested in that. So other than that, let's go ahead and get started with the process. So this is a 2015 Subaru BRZ. This headlamp, the right side one, the passenger side, actually wasn't as bad as the driver's side. The driver's side was like really bad. It was like really yellow and hazy, and that's just because wherever the car is parked, the sun is hitting it on that side more often than the other side, which is why you have like an imbalance in the condition of the headlamps. So this one actually wasn't as bad as the driver's side. I should have got this on the driver's side. That would have been better for before and after. So here, the headlamps are already cracked, meaning like as much sanding as you do, like they're already damaged, so you're not going to get pure perfection. So I already know that if you have an older vehicle or you just drive the living crap out of yours and you just have a lot of cracks and stuff, some of those may not come out. You could potentially remove more if you want to go lower and lower in sandpaper, but here I'm not. So the process is I'm going to go with 800, 1000, 2000 and 3000 sandpaper. That's the full sanding process. Now I'm going all the way up to 3000 because I don't have a rotary. If you had a rotary, you can probably stop at 1500, 2000 for sure. But since I want to make my life easier and my little Adams Polisher Swirl Killer isn't the strongest thing to pull out 2000 scratches, then I'm gonna go all the way up to 3000. So first step here is to mask off the paint. We want to do this because while we're sanding the headlamps, we don't want some of that sandpaper to be scratching the paint and then you're messing up the paint. So put 1 layer or 2 layers of tape, just depending on the type of headlamp that you're using. Like on this one, it's a small one. I've been doing it for a while, so I'm fine with just 1 tape line. But if it's like a bigger headlamp and I'm gonna get closer to the paint surfaces, I'll put 2. But here I'm just putting 1. If you're just starting this off for the first time, you might want to use more tape and cover more painted areas just to be sure that you don't scratch the actual paint. Because imagine like if you do scratch the paint and you're starting off with like 500, yeah, you're gonna do like some irreversible damage there. So mask off the painted surfaces with tape. Whatever tape you have here, I'm using the 3M something, but any tape will do. All right, so we got the headlamp masked off. Now, again, as I said, we're gonna start off with 800, move up to 1000, move up to 2000, then finish off with 3000. Now, the 800, the first phase is probably the most important because the initial sandpaper that you start off with is what's gonna take off all that oxidized old gunk of a clear coat that's on the headlamp. So you want to make sure you're taking your time. Like you really don't want to rush this process, and especially this step, because this is really gonna make or break your headlight restoration process. Now you can basically say that at every sanding phase, but definitely you want to spend your time. You want to make sure you have an even coat of sanding, if that makes sense, where like you want to make sure that all your all the sanding is even throughout the entire headlamp. So for the sanding, I'll use 1 800, 1 1000, 1 2000, 1 3000 per headlamp. So I'm using 2 for the entire set because I'm using 1 for one for the other. And I'm also using the 3-inch foam backing plate or foam cushion plate from Grits. Again, I have it all linked down below. And here it's very important. You want to make sure you're having even coverage with your sanding. I'm gonna be using a water hose just because I had it right there and I didn't want to grab a spray bottle. But you want to continuously rinse down the slurry, whatever you call it, the clear coat, because you don't want it to get stuck into the sanding paper. So you want to continuously rinse off the headlamp. That way you're always working on a clean surface. Now you could use a machine. I could put this on the 3-inch Adams Swirl Killer, but it'd make more of a mess, so that's why I'm going by hand, and I don't want to make that much noise in the morning. So you could, if you have a machine, you could put it on a machine. I'm personally just doing it by hand, and if you're just starting and this is your first time, I recommend you do it by hand. Yes, it's gonna take longer, but it's also safer when doing it by hand. And you wanna make sure you're putting even pressure on that sanding disc. It's better to go slow and steady than trying to like hurry up and putting like super high pressure on one side and then like getting fatigued and then like lowering your pressure on the other side. So smooth and steady throughout the entire process. Don't try to go out there super hard and then you slow down, and then like one portion is sand down well and then the other portion is not that well, because then that's gonna cause the imbalance, and as you move forward, you're gonna see inconsistent results throughout the sanding phase. So as you can see there, once I'm done with the 800, it's a nice even sanded surface. If you see like some high spots where like one is like not as hazy or not as like sanded as the other, you want to focus on that part, but you want to make sure it's even throughout the headlamp. If one part seems like there's more, like you can see some of the oxidation or it's just like not consistent, then you want to work it a bit more. Now this could just be me, but the first initial phase with the 800, you're gonna take more time. The 1000, it's not gonna take as much time. So it's gonna take a while, but not as much. And then you move up to 2000, it's gonna take time, but not as much as the 1000. And then you can go up to 3000, and the 3000 won't take up as much time as the 2000. You're still taking your time and being patient, but you might decrease the working time just a little bit because you're not going for those aggressive deep sanding as you are with the 800. Each one is to alleviate the sanding marks from the previous step. So the more you keep on moving up in sanding in the coarseness, then the less amount of time you have to spend. At least that's what I see. I could be wrong, or others can do it the same way where they want to spend the exact same time every single time. Find out what works for you, but for me, it's like as I'm going on the sanding disc, as I'm going higher and higher, I seem to spend just a little bit less time. Not like significant, like not one is 15 minutes and the other one is 7 minutes. More like a 3 to 5 minute difference, if that's even accurate. But there's a minimal difference that of time that I'm spending as I'm going up in the coarseness. Now, depending on your headlamps, you may have to work it in a very weird way. Like if your headlamp, as you see here, like on the very edge is very narrow, then you might have to kind of crunch up your, not crunch up, but fold your sanding disc so you really get into that tight spot. Maybe you might have to cut your sanding disc, so use it like on your finger to get to the very tight edge. This one's not that bad, but some headlights will give you a bit of those problems where like it's a really weird shape. It's very narrow, like no machine or like regular sized sanding paper is gonna get to that small corner. So you might have to go by hand and very meticulously sand that down. Now, before you move on to the next sanding phase, you want to make sure you completely rinse down the headlamp, and you want to make sure you wipe it down so that there's no other bit of that coarse, that sanding paper coarse grit on the headlamp. So imagine if you're going from 800 and you sand it all down and you rinse it down, but there's still a little bit of grit left over on the headlamp from 800 as you jump up to 1000. That means when you're working the 1000 into the headlamp, some of that 800 is gonna get caught in there. And then as you're trying to work that 1000, you still have a little bit of that 800 left in there. So as you're trying to level out the 800 sanding disc marks, you are still putting an 800 grit sanding scratch in there because it got caught and you didn't rinse it down well enough. So that would definitely mess up your problem. So as you move on to the next sanding phase, make sure that headlamp is completely rinsed, completely has no other bit of grit or coarseness from the previous step, because even if you have a little bit there and it's leaving those fine scratches, you're not going to remove them if you keep on going up in coarseness, because that's not meant to remove an 800 scratch, an 800 sanding scratch. Hopefully that made sense. It just make sure before you start the next sanding phase that the headlamp is completely clean and there's no other grit on there before you start sanding. Other than that, keep on applying the same process that you are on the 800 and the 1000 and the 2000. Just even pressure, make sure it's even throughout the entire headlamp. And you should at this point start seeing the headlights more clear. Like you should have more clarity between the headlights as you keep on moving up in the sanding disc. Now, when you wet the headlamp, it is gonna look much better. Once it dries out, you will see all those scratches. That's okay. And as you move up in the sanding discs and the coarseness, then every time you put water on it, it should look more clear as well. So that's a good sign that you're going in the right direction. Like I mentioned, if you had a rotary, you could dig out those scratches at around 2,000, maybe even 1,500, and call it ends there, which you would get much quicker results. But with this one, I have the Atom Swirl Killer, not the strongest when you're comparing it in context to sanding marks and removing sanding marks. So you could stop it, like maybe you can go to 2,500, but just to make my life easier, I'm gonna go up to 3,000. And I'll take them out there. That would be easiest. So here I'm using the Oberg 3-inch cutting disc with the Oberg compound on the Atom Swirl Killer polisher, and at this point you're just polishing. It is best, depending on the headlamp, to have a 3-inch because you can really, really get that polisher where it needs to be. If you have a smaller headlamp or like a size like this, but you're using like a 5-inch or a 6-inch, it's a lot more difficult, especially if you're using like a long throw, like a 15 or 21 with a 5-inch, or let's say like a 6.5-inch pad. Yeah, that's gonna be a no-go for the headlamp. So if you can, like if you have a 3-inch polisher, that's probably best, but it does depend on the size of your headlamp. If you have like some Escalade, like super boxy, super boxed headlamps, then yeah, it makes sense to go with like a 5-inch pad or even a long throw possibly, and then switch up to a smaller one. And if life would be much easier if you have like a pneumatic 1-inch polisher as well to get into those corners. Aside from that, I just in general recommend using a 3-inch polisher. And getting into the tight areas, again, you have to go by hand. If you have that pneumatic 1-inch, that makes life easier. Or there's other options that are 1-inch, not just pneumatic. But if not, just go by hand like I am here to remove those scratches in the tight corners just by hand. So at this point, the headlight should be looking great. You have all that clarity. It looks brand new. So now that we did the compound phase, right, to remove the 3,000 scratches, now we're gonna go to polishing to remove the compounding swirls or micro scratching that we have in there. So now we're gonna go to the polishing. Here I'm using the Oberg Yellow Polish Pad with Oberg Supreme Polish. That's their combo that they have. And same thing, just working it in and getting that absolute clarity that we can get. And boom, there we go. We have completely restored these headlights. Now, if it was more sunny and you could really see into the headlamp, there's a lot of scratches in there. Not like micro scratches, but like the headlamp is deteriorating. Like I can't fix those scratches, those cracks, because it's just over time. It's however many years old. Like there's nothing I can do. Possibly you can go down like much lower with your sanding paper, but that does take a lot more time. So the lower you go in sanding paper, the more time it's gonna take to work yourself back out of that. So if you are looking for perfection, make sure that the headlamp itself is able to go to a lot more to perfection than if it's not, if that makes sense. Like if it's like a 2012 vehicle and it's always in the sun and you can see cracking and all that, you don't want to set up the customer and be like, yeah, I can get them to like a brand new condition. No, you want to say I can make them look a lot better, but they're not going to be perfect because they're so old. I can see cracking. So it's just setting up the proper expectations with the type of headlamp that you're working. So that sucked. I had about like another 7 minutes worth of content and I was talking and giving advice and I didn't realize that the camera had turned off on me. So I have no idea where I left off, other than I know I just said that set up the customer with the proper expectations. So if you have any comments, questions, concerns, leave those down below. I'll have the products linked down below in the description box. I'll try to see what I can find because it can get expensive depending on what option you choose, especially with the sandpaper. So it can be quite frustrating if you don't do this right. Trust me, I've been there, where like you're doing all the steps and at the end of it, you're not, you don't get the results that you want. So my advice to you would be to go slow with this. Don't try to finish it all in 1 hour. Like set aside 1 hour for one headlamp and do the other one tomorrow, the next day, later on in the day. Don't be in a rush, because if you rush and one step goes wrong, you might have to do everything all over, or at least start off where you made that mistake in order to get the results that you want. and really based on the headlights that you have, how bad they are, I really recommend, if this is your first time or one of your first few times, take your time, do one headlamp, do it the best that you can, wait a few hours, tomorrow do the next one, because you don't want to rush any of this. It's very frustrating when you think you're doing a great job, everything's going great, you're taking your time, you compound the 3,000 sanding marks, and then you're like, I can still see scratches, and then that means somewhere in the sanding process you went wrong, or just at some point you made an error. So don't rush it, take your time, and that's what I'd recommend for success. So if you have any comments, questions, concerns, leave those down below. Check the description box for the links. If you have any comments, definitely let me know, because it can be a frustrating process. It can take quite a bit of time, so I'll be happy to help you guys out, and I'll see you guys on the next one.